My name is Alison Moore. My company is BluePoint Venture Marketing. We offer a range of marketing services from marketing programs through social media to public relations for technology companies of all stages. What we'd like to talk about today is early stage technology companies and the kind of mistakes we see our clients make and hopefully offer some information up that will help you avoid making those same mistakes. The first thing we often see with early stage companies is inadequate customer research. So very often somebody will come to us. Usually they have been funded by a venture capital firm or by angels. In some cases they're self-funded. And they have a really good idea. They've developed a product or are pretty far along in developing a product. And know that the idea is good and know that it's different from other things out there in the marketplace. The problem is not so much in influencing the technology itself, but influencing how that technology is going to get communicated to future audiences. So we work very closely with our companies at early stages to make sure that they have actually gone out and talked to at least 20 people who would be considered qualified prospects. And those conversations can happen in person, they can happen on the telephone, they can happen as an online survey through any one of the SurveyMonkey or other tools like that. But it's absolutely critically important that the founders of the company and or their marketing team go out and do a little bit of research in the field. This does not have to be the $50,000 marketing research program, but that information is absolutely critical. And some of the things that you want to learn when you go out are, first of all, what are people using to solve the problem that you're solving currently? In other words, what other technologies are there out there that people may be using to solve the problem that you don't know about? And sometimes those won't even be competing technologies. So very often a company will come to us and say, oh, well, we don't have any competition. Our technology is unique. And our response is always, well, yeah, there's always competition out there. And sometimes that competition is a combination of spreadsheets or other tools that the prospect might currently be using to solve the problem. Sometimes it's a bunch of manual labor that somebody is using or executing to solve the problem. But it's really important to identify the competition and figure out how you can position yourselves against that. One of the things that's really important to do is to develop a value proposition that is compelling to the prospect, and hopefully you have talked to enough prospects to know what's compelling and what's not. Differentiated from the competition, so that's important, whether it be a technology competition or homemade processes that are competing and solving the problem that you're solving. And authentic to you, authentic to the company. So you want to make sure that you aren't coming up with a description of your product or service that is not consistent with who you are as individuals. Companies very much take on the personalities of the individuals that found them in the beginning. And it's really important to make sure that you are comfortable with what you're saying about the product and what kind of problem it's solving. The other thing that we often see in early stage companies is an undue focus on branding and branding elements. So we've seen companies that will spend hours and hours and hours, days and days, weeks and weeks, months and months trying to come up with a name for the company. This is normally the biggest waste of time that we see. It really is the biggest waste. In a business-to-business environment, it isn't all that important that you come up with the world's most compelling name. It is important that you come up with something that's understandable, that's readable, and that you can get a decent URL for, i.e. one that people can spell and write. In a consumer brand, it's a slightly different story. You do want to come up with a name that's compelling, but you want to make sure that you use an objective process to do that. A lot of early stage companies will start with a very subjective process. People come up with names they like, they start talking about them, and it rapidly evolves into a very big process involving a lot of people and potentially a lot of hurt feelings. Founders understandably feel very connected to the companies that they create, and they want to make sure that the name of the company and its identity out there in the world is consistent with what their vision is. The problem is their vision may not be consistent with where the marketplace is. So it's important to bring in some objective criteria on names, to name, not only name, but any other element that you are putting together for an identity, whether it's a website, a logo, color schemes, typefaces, all those things need to have, first of all, objective criteria developed so that when somebody offers up an idea for a name, you can judge it against the objective criteria that you've already established and make a business decision on it rather than a subjective and personal and opinion-based decision about it. So that's a really important pitfall to avoid when you're an early stage company. The other thing that we see very often is an avoidance of metrics. So it's really important, especially when it comes to marketing, that you consider the metrics that are possible to put together and understand where you're spending your money, how you're spending your money, and if it's being effective. So a lot of times companies will come to us and say, okay, this is how much money we have for the marketing budget. And I'll always say, well, okay, well, how do you know that's how much money you need? And it's sort of like, well, there's some, it's 10% of revenue or some such figure like that. The reality is you don't know how much money you're going to need to spend on marketing until you start marketing. So what we always advise people to do is start with some small electronic pilot programs. On the sort of marketing programs, lead generation side of it, what you want to be able to do is execute a program and, having not spent very much money, come out at the end of it and be able to see whether or not you were targeting properly, whether or not your message was resonating, whether or not you were delivering the right offer, and whether or not you had chosen the right channel of delivery. And we recommend a series of small electronic pilot programs so that you can fine-tune as you go and ultimately come to a recipe or a solution that helps you understand where you're going to get your leads, how qualified they're going to be, what they're going to cost you, and how that impacts the bottom line. So ultimately, it should come down to a recipe or a formula that is repeatable and scalable. That's how companies grow. On the public relations side of the business, there are a multitude of tools out there that you can use to measure the effectiveness of public relations. But really the simplest thing to do is watch your web traffic when you issue a release or when you get good coverage. I mean, that's a very basic way that you could start measuring public relations today. But if you are working with a firm or an outside consultant, go ahead and ask them about measurement tools and work together to put together a strategy for measuring public relations that's going to help you understand, again, how much money you should be budgeting and which areas that money should be put in. So just to recap and help you avoid making the errors that early stage technology companies commonly make, we want to just review a couple of things. One is you got to do your homework. You got to make sure that you understand who your customers and prospects are. You can talk to peers in the industry all you want, but there is nothing that can substitute for actually talking to customers and prospects and understanding what their needs are and understanding whether or not you are meeting their needs. Secondly, it's really important to develop a very crisp and clear value proposition and to make sure that that value proposition is right in the forefront of every bit of marketing material you create. It needs to be represented on your website. It needs to be in press releases. It needs to be in sales collateral, in your PowerPoints, everything you do. That value proposition should be there. And by the way, all your employees should be able to articulate it very clearly, if in slightly different words, to suit their individual styles. You want to resist committee decisions. So a lot of companies get really down a rat hole on branding and naming and logo development, and you want to make sure that you are not subjecting business decisions to personal opinion. So make sure that you establish objective criteria and a clear process and avoid committee decisions. And then finally, of course, to measure everything. There is nothing in marketing now that can't be measured. That was perhaps not true 5 years ago or 10 years ago even. But there is a tool or a technology out there to measure absolutely everything you do. And it's critical that you do that so you understand what kinds of budgets you need to apply to the various functions and how you're going to be able to scale and grow as a business. So thank you for listening today, and good luck.